My name is Bob Stefanowski. I grew up in New Haven and I went to the public schools. I graduated from Fairfield University, met my wife Amy, and we've raised 3 terrific daughters here in Connecticut. They're here in the front row. One of them skipped out on us, but we're going to get her back. I was a CEO of different divisions of GE. I turned around billion-dollar failed divisions. I was Chief Executive Officer of UBS Investment Bank, where I was responsible for a $500 billion balance sheet over 35 countries. I was able to take advantage of what Connecticut used to offer our young people. More people should have the opportunity that I had. The problem is Dan Malloy and the career politicians in Hartford have ruined it for everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about my 5-part plan to rebuild Connecticut. We're going to get rid of the estate tax. We're going to get rid of the corporate tax over 2 years. We're going to phase out the state income tax over 8 years. We're going to cut costs through zero-based budgeting, and we're going to introduce a taxpayer bill of rights to give the power back to the people. Now, you may hear tonight that this plan is too ambitious, or that what this state really needs is even more government experience. I'll tell you, that's not what we need. We need a leader who knows how to negotiate, who knows how to build consensus, who knows how to budget, who knows how to have tough discussions, and knows how to get it done. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I'm going to do it for the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Bob Stefanowski. This governor has been persecuting law-abiding gun owners for the last 8 years, and it needs to stop. What we need to focus on is mental health, keeping the guns out of the hands of the people that should not have them, not persecuting people that have gone through the right background checks and done absolutely nothing wrong.
Mr. Bowden? Yeah, I would just want to say I served in the United States military. I served in the U.S. infantry, carried an M16 A2 rifle. I could put a blindfold on right now and tear it down and put it back together in about a minute and a half. Bottom line is this, is that we don't, you never forget that, but the bottom line is that we don't need any more gun laws. We don't need any more gun laws. And so as your next governor, I would oppose any further gun laws or any erosion, and if a bill were put on my desk, passed by both the House and the Senate to repeal the current set of laws or somehow amend them so that they're more friendly and for lawful gun owners, I would be supportive of that action. I think at the end of the day, we have something called the United States Constitution, and as mentioned, a state constitution that's very clear about what your rights are, what our rights are in terms of gun ownership. I think that all of us ought to be supportive of that. I certainly am supportive of that. In terms of sanctuary city, let me just tell you something. There's nobody that has more experience with the issue of illegal immigration than I do. Just today, our police officers apprehended somebody who was here illegally and was on a deportation order, and that person is up for deportation today. Just last week, an individual was unfortunately involved in an accident that was here illegally, that was running out of the courthouse from ICE agents, and our police were assisting as well. So I get what has to happen in terms of enforcing the Constitution, and we stand ready to work with our federal partners each and every day to be able to do that.
As the father of 5 children who go to school every day, there's nothing that matters more to me and my wife than they get home safely at the end of the day. The most important responsibility for our next governor is to keep our children safe. It's wonderful here to offer sound bites for applause lines, but your next governor is here to deliver solutions. And when I was running my own business, I was ultimately responsible for delivering results. So let's talk about that instead of trying to deliver applause lines. There are 3 areas where I think we can actually make a difference in keeping people safe. The first is in mental health. When we passed this gun legislation, it was supposed to be accompanied by mental health. It's never been funded properly. Too often the people pulling the trigger are at risk of hurting themselves and others. We need to fulfill that responsibility. The second is for our law enforcement officers. We need to make sure that they not only have the equipment and the training, but they have the support with our IT and our coordination when they are put in harm's way. The last that's most important is, what are we going to do actually in our schools to keep them safe? My approach to all of these is to look to see where they actually done it well in the rest of the world. In Israel, they had a problem where their schools became targets 20 years ago. They figured out how to make their schools safe. In some cases, it's hardening the perimeter. In some cases, it's putting somebody trained with a weapon in the school. These are the kinds of ideas that I support. Again, not sound bites, solutions. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I'd like to remind you, too, you can always come back and continue at the same conversation if you want to circle back at the same topic. So if you wanted to come back and say something else, you could. But we'll move on. Mr. Bowden, you start the second round of questioning here. You had mentioned sanctuary cities. I want to go back to that. Again, activity, what activity would you look to, I know you touched on it a little bit, but maybe in a little bit more detail, to change the current sanctuary city laws and the status here in cities like New Haven and Hartford? What can you do specifically to stop sanctuary cities?
Well, first we got to repeal the state statute called the Trust Act. I mean, the Trust Act was passed by this legislature, and in many cases, a bipartisan basis. I don't think many of our legislators understood what was in it. But what it did is it prohibited our state police from working closely with federal agents when it comes to immigration issues. I can't ask our state police as governor, and I don't ask my Danbury local police as mayor, to ignore a federal bench warrant from a federal judge that says this person ought to actually be deported. And I'll go one step further with you. In Danbury, we partnered with ICE in a program called 287G, where some of our officers were trained as immigration agents, and they went after the hardened criminals within our community that were abusing not only the public at large, but also the immigrant community as well. And to give you a quick summary of how that program worked before President Obama ended it, we had apprehended 22 people within that program who were deported. One was actually wanted for murder in Eastern Europe. Another one was caught taking flying lessons at Danbury Airport, and he wasn't learning how to land. Another person was a serial habitual involved in exploitation of children. And another one had 8 DWIs. So these kinds of programs as force multipliers, when we work together, both state, federal, and local agencies, we can do wonderful things when it comes to crime and when it comes to issues revolving this issue. That's why Danbury has year in and year out been named as the safest city in the state of Connecticut.
First thing you need to do is roll back this governor's outrageous executive orders that don't seem to comprehend or understand the fact that under our system of laws in this country, we respect federal law as being supreme to that of the states and locals. Can you imagine if Mark Boughton or I, in Trumbull and Danbury, decided to defy a state law, not follow it? The governor would send his chief legal counsel to court to seek a declaratory judgment to compel us to enforce state law. But this governor doesn't seem to think we have to enforce federal law. The first thing I'm going to do as governor is issue an executive order requiring local law enforcement to work with state police when they make an arrest to ask the question if a person is here legally or illegally. Because you can't determine statistics if you don't have a baseline. The next thing I'm going to require is that the state police work with locals to determine the number of people in cities illegally that are committing crimes, and how many of those crimes are violent crimes or repeat offenses. You have to have a governor that acknowledges you have to work with local law enforcement. The other thing I'm going to do is not continue to decimate the Connecticut State Police like this governor has done. When he took office 8 years ago, we had over 1,200 state troopers. We're now down to a low 900, with another 220 eligible for retirement in the next 3 years with no mitigation plan in place, and with skeletal crews in many of the divisions that would deal with this problem directly. When I am governor, the state police will have no greater advocate than Tim Herbst. We're going to invest in law enforcement, we're going to enforce federal law, and we're going to make sure that locals and state are working together to deal with the problem.
Would anyone else like to comment on that question? Thank you. Want to move on to question 3? Okay. Once again, you have Bob, you have 11 minutes and 41 seconds. Steve, you have 11:15. Mark 9:16. Tim 8:33, and David 10:22. Question goes to Steve Upsitnik. Gentlemen, if I were to close my eyes and listen to any of you talk about any issue, I might not be able to distinguish which of you is answering that question. With all due respect, in some cases you sound incredibly similar on many issues. So, what's the difference maker? Why should I vote for Mayor Boughton? Why should I vote for Mr. Stemmerman? Why should I vote for Mr. Stefanowski? Why should I vote for you, Steve?
3 words: makers versus takers. You all have to decide. You can applaud. You all have to decide who you want to have as your next governor. We've had takers in Hartford for 40 years leading us down a road to ruin. Because what a taker does is take from your pocket and put into their pocket. And with all due respect to the gentleman on the stage, career politicians take your hard-working dollars, convert it to taxes, and put it in their pocket to spend it. And wealthy finance billionaires take your money and take fees out from it. I'm a job maker. And what job makers do is build products. I'm the only one that builds products. So I go and I get some raw material from someone and she makes a buck. I hire an individual, they make a buck building a product. I sell it to an individual, they put money in their pocket so they can put food on their table. So this election is about a mindset. It's about a mindset of being a maker versus a taker. And this state has been led by takers for far too long. I have built successful high-tech companies around the world. One of them most people associate is that woman Siri on the iPhone. I apologize, she's not perfect. But what makers do is take risks so that everyone gets more money in their pocket. That's how I define the difference very succinctly.
You guys all want to pass that question as well? David?
Well, Lee, since this is the question that we're all here for, I think I should probably answer it. So, yes, you're going to hear a lot of people on this stage saying that they want to do the same thing. They want to cut your taxes, they want to get spending under control, they want to balance the budget, they want to grow jobs. And that's what we want all over the state, Republican, Democrat, Independent. What we are here to choose now is our leader. A leader that's going to bring our party to victory in November and is going to change this state. We are looking for leadership, and I would say there are 2 qualities that are going to be most important. The first is, who's not just going to offer you empty slogans, but who is going to give you a detailed plan of how to do it. Everybody on this stage claims they have a plan. We are the only candidate that has been endorsed by the Hartford Current as saying they have a detailed plan that is credible. Woo! We have begun at the beginning of our campaign to give details on our website, davidstowerman.com. There are 2 key things that we need to accomplish. We need to save our state from a financial crisis that's threatening our families and jobs, and we need to create growth again. We are the only candidate in either party that's giving you that detail. We don't talk about reforming state employee contracts. We talk about restructuring. We talk about it in a way that no candidate has in this state or no candidate for governor in any other state, drawing upon examples in the private sector. For growth, with all due respect, Steve, there are other people on this stage that have created jobs. I started a business myself from a single desk, and I know what it is to meet payroll. In any given day, you're either losing money or making money. And if you were losing money, you needed to do something different so that you could be around to make money. And what that is all about is seeing the tremendous potential in our state and making it happen. In terms of cutting taxes, again, I'm sure we're going to get there at some point this evening. We got 2 guys on the stage that are promising to eliminate the income tax. It's been described in the Hartford Current as pie in the sky. Now, I'm in favor of reducing the income tax just like everybody else. But we have received empty promises for politicians for decades, and that's why we're in the mess we're in today. And anyone here today that's making another empty promise for you should not earn your respect, should not earn your vote to be the next governor. Thank you.
Bob? Lee, with all due respect, that is the limited, simple thinking that's gotten us into the problem that this state's in right now. This state needs leadership. I grew up in New Haven. I went to the public schools. I started at GE as an entry-level person. GE has 300,000 employees. Typical hedge fund, 50 people looking at computer screens. Typical budget of a state town, $150 million. The state of Connecticut is a $40 billion biannual budget. I'm the only one on the stage that's run anything anywhere near the size of the state of Connecticut. I love the editorial board of the Hartford Current. I'll tell you, but when I looked for an economic plan, I went to Art Laffer. Art developed Ronald Reagan's tax plan, and he just helped Donald Trump put the best tax cuts in we've seen in a decade. We're going to eliminate the death tax. We're going to phase out the corporate income tax. We're going to eliminate the state income tax over 8 years. We're going to introduce a taxpayer bill of rights, and we're going to rip costs out of this government through zero-based budgeting. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've been told I couldn't do something, only to have people come back to me a year and 2 years later. This state needs leadership. It doesn't need incrementalism. It needs leadership. It needs it now, and it needs it before it's too late.
I'd like to jump right back in, because it's important here that we need to have leaders who also understand the numbers. The numbers are that the next governor is facing an $11 billion budget deficit. Personal income tax brings in $9.5 billion a year. It's one thing to have big aspirations, and we have big aspirations. We have a plan to get the train from New York City to Stanford in 30 minutes, New Haven in 60, and an hour and 30 up to Hartford. Those are plans that we could actually execute. This is a pipe dream. And it's important for all of you to do your homework and to hold everybody in this stage accountable so that the ideas that they're offering are ones that can be implemented.
There's plenty of numbers guys out there. I've made a career of hiring numbers guys. What we need in this state is leadership. We need bold thinking. We need somebody that's run organizations. We need somebody with the guts to come up here and say, we can get rid of this state income tax. Before 1991, there was no state income tax. This was the fastest growing state in the entire country. Why can't we do it again?
Mr. Bowden?
Let me just say this, staff. First of all, I can't believe we're citing the Hartford Current as a paper.
I agree.
Talk about fake news. Are you kidding me? Look, we have some great people that are running, and I respect it. But leading is different than running a business. It's a different skill set. And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to lead this state, you've got to be able to bring people together to gain a consensus to be able to move stuff forward, whether it be the community and the state at large, or whether it be our legislature as well, to get them on board to what you want to do. You see, in business, you can just tell people to do something and they get fired. You can't do that in government. That's why it's a different skill set that goes on here. And so I think you got to be careful that we don't go out and try to put somebody forward that needs on-the-job training. Because this is not a time for OJT. This is a time where this state is facing serious concerns, tragic in some cases. And we are going to need to be big and bold and brave in the things that we put forward. My plan also calls for phasing out the state income tax. Because I'm not stuck in a bureaucratic box that says, oh, it can never be done. The part of governing that I believe in is making the impossible possible for our residents. And so our plan slowly moves it down each year. First, at least to be competitive with Massachusetts and with the surrounding states. And then work our way all the way through. That's what I think we ought to be doing. And that's why the skill set that we have is completely different.
Mr. Steve, go ahead. Steve, you can go ahead.
Okay. You know, I seem to remember Dan Malloy 4 and 8 years ago said, we shouldn't follow a business path. And where's that gotten us? Charlie Baker is running circles around this state, a pragmatic business outsider. So is Rick Scott in Florida, so is Larry Hogan in Maryland. Why? Because people, in my case, who has a military background, has run large organizations and operations of 30,000 people, SEALs and aircraft carriers and everything else together, down to making risk decisions to building businesses, is what this state needs going forward. We've heard about these dreams. 1994, Governor Rowland said, we're going to eliminate the income tax. It sounds so wonderful, but you have to have the mind of an engineer to engineer your way out of that. It sounds wonderful, but you need to have a plan. That's why my plan, I did myself. I didn't pay hundreds of thousands of dollars from people from Washington. I didn't just use a soundbite. It's a 5-step plan to build 300,000 jobs over the next 8 years. It talks about phase 1, making it more affordable here, eliminating the corporate tax, getting tax off of seniors as far as the state tax, death tax, and pensions. It talks about making a tax cut day one for people who make under $100,000 a year. It talks about specific cuts, $3.5 billion annually, which we can document. I'd love to have everyone else document here tonight, what you're going to do to close that budget. But that's what you get with my plan. A plan that an engineer has that gets around a big vision that no one in this state will argue with. Who does not want to raise or build 300,000 jobs in this state? That's what leaders do. A big vision, mobilize people, and deliver results.
I kind of waited for everyone to go here. Everyone seems to forget something. We can't fix the state of Connecticut until one critical thing happens first, and that's called winning an election. And if we don't nominate candidates that have proven an ability to win tough elections, be through tough elections, we're going to be looking at Governor Ned Lamont. Now let me just say this. This election comes down to one word. This primary comes down to one word, and that word is trust. Who can Republicans trust to prosecute the campaign, to lead us to victory, but more importantly, who can Republicans trust to govern like a Republican? And I'm going to be very honest, and I say this as respectfully as I can. I have a problem trusting somebody to be our nominee who has donated to Barack Obama and Chris Dodd. I have a problem with people that get on the stage that have attacked people that have served in public service who have not voted in 16 years in any election. And I have a problem when somebody switches their political affiliation from Democrat to Republican a month before they announce their candidacy for governor of the state of Connecticut. And I do not trust anyone who becomes a Democrat 3 weeks before Donald Trump is elected and doesn't vote in that election either. So I've taken a lot of shots for being in public service, and I get that. Actions speak louder than words. We have had 7 debates. I have participated in all 7. It's time to vet our candidates, mano a mano, not hiding behind the ads or the mail, getting on stage, articulating a vision, and defending your record.
Bob, would you like to respond?
Timmy, first of all, when you criticize someone, you may give them the courtesy of using their name next time. So listen, I was overseas for 10 years. I was a global executive.
Yo, stop. You guys can't engage the candidate, or you will be bounced. Thank you.
I didn't vote. I should have. I wish it were different. I can tell you, though, when I travel the state, there are a ton of disaffected voters out there. They're tired of just that type of speech, where you get a political person up there trying to push his own agenda without any facts. And these people are going to come roaring back in November, and they're going to let somebody like me, who's got real-world experience and who knows how to run a business. Now, talk about voting for a minute, Timmy. I took a look at your TV commercial the other day. It's pretty good. And in there, you argue that you lowered taxes 2 times when you're head of Trump. What you failed to mention is that you actually raised taxes 8 times. And then, over the term of your tenure in Trumbull, taxes were up 38%.
Wrong.
You failed to mention that you're taking $1.3 million, $1.3 million, $25,000 a day of taxpayer money to buy bumper stickers and yard signs. So Tim, we can throw mud at each other all night if you want to, and I'm more than happy to do it. But I think the people Timmy, let me finish, please. I let you finish. Yeah. But the people in the audience want to hear who's best positioned to run the state, who has the best plan, which I do. They don't want us slinging mud at each other, that they want to evaluate for themselves, and I'm quite comfortable where they're going to come out to.
Now, when my successor introduced her budget and said that I kept the tax rate stable, I'm going to take the word of the Board of Finance and my successor that talked about a stable tax rate, balancing 8 budgets, cutting taxes, and reforming a broken pension system. You know, Bob, I've got a lot of friends from high school, from college, from Trumbull, that served in the military. And one of them was under active heavy fire in Fallujah during the surge. And he found time to vote by absentee ballot. And you know what, Bob? You can bet he's going to be voting on August 14th in this primary.
Anyone else? So the Democrats are having a debate tonight. You guys know that, right? Does anybody really care about that one at all? I mean, seriously. All right. How many of you have been stuck on 95? All right, third round of questionings, fourth round of questionings. Newsflash, we start with David Stemmerman. Our infrastructure is crumbling. In a recent CNBC study, Connecticut was 47th out of 50 when it came to our roads and bridges. This is a big problem. This is a safety issue as well as a business drain. How do you begin fixing, and would you ever incorporate tolls in helping raise enough money to fix the roads?
So Lee, thanks. That's a great question. When I think about what we need in our state to attract families and business back, we need a plan that takes advantage of our competitive advantages. And there were three things that used to bring families and businesses here. Our location between New York and Boston, heart of New England. Second was our strong schools and the quality of our workforce. And the third is our affordability. We used to have lower taxes and lower cost of doing business. And in terms of our location, it's only valuable if we have a transportation infrastructure that's working. And this is a perfect example of how the debate is broken today and our outside-the-box thinking will fix it. Dan Malloy, who has busted the trust fund, who went to New Canaan, whose lifeblood is the train, and said, we're going to cut your train service unless you agree to tolls. And not just any tolls, the most tolled state in the country. And the Republicans have said no to tolls. We're already taxed enough. We don't trust the government to spend our money wisely. The average state spends $180,000 per mile of highway. We spend $425,000. But what we need solutions. The train is slower today than it was in 1970. We have among the most congested roads in the country. What are we going to do about it? I draw upon my business experience to say all over the world there's a better way. We attract billions of dollars of private capital in private-public partnerships. That's how they do it in Asia. That's how they do it in Europe. That's how they do it in such faraway places as LaGuardia Airport in the state of Florida. But that's the kind of thinking we need to bring here to Connecticut. And the kind of people we'll bring here is people who know how to do this. We'll bring in people from Florida. We'll bring in people from Washington, D.C. We'll bring in bids from Europe, Asia, all over the world. And we'll get our train from New York City to Stamford in 30 minutes, New Haven in 60. We're going to add lanes to our highways. We're going to add new airports. And this place is going to get moving again.
No way. Steve?
No tolls. We all know what happens. Whenever we send more money to Hartford, what happens? It goes to spend on something else. We have a $1.5 billion special transportation fund. You know why it's special? It's a cookie jar for politicians to go in and pull $400. We had a saying in the Navy, and I saw a few veterans here, it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. And we've got to do a lot more inspecting in this state. As David said, it costs the rest of the nation about $100,000 to build a mile of road. Us, $440,000. Those orange DOT trucks, like $400 a gallon to paint that thing. So I think we have to do an audit on all these projects before I ask anyone to put one more cent on that. And yes, my wife goes into the city, and I've lost about 20 minutes a day of her life. And we have a problem getting from New Haven up to this part of the nation. And if I have my plan around 300,000 jobs and building around this area an underwater excellence center for submarine warfare, we're going to have to speed the trains up out here as we build up EB and do everything else that I did down at that base. So we have a plan which we have rolled out. It does rely on public-private partnerships, no more tolls, more inspecting, not expecting from government.
Mark?
Thanks. Couple couple of things that I just want to make an observation about. One of the things that we have to focus on is what is doable in our lifetime. Because what happens with the DOT and all of the projects that are programmed there, they are an entity unto themselves that make policy decisions each and every day and program decisions each and every day of projects that none of us will ever see, or at best we might be on the beach with a margarita if it's finished. So the reality is that we can't rely on bureaucrats in a department somewhere tucked away in a corner to make critical decisions about what we should be investing in and how we should be investing in. We ought to reinstate the Transportation Strategy Board, one mechanism that's used to prioritize our projects. We need to spin down and scale back the projects we have so we all can see movement at 95, 84, and all the rest of the highways and byways in the state of Connecticut. We need to utilize our harbors and our ports much, much better. There's a tremendous amount of potential in those particular areas. We need to look at places like Tweed Airport, where we can expand and add in commercial flights in and out of there so you don't have to drive to JFK or LaGuardia from our neck of the woods. Bottom line is that it costs us about $3.5 billion more to do the same program projects than what it costs surrounding states. Something is clearly broken in the way that we do things. And I just want to add one other thing. You're going to have a lockbox vote in November. I'm telling you all right here, you hear lockbox, watch your wallet. Because that money will never stay in that lockbox, or it'll be intercepted before it ever gets in. Remember, the lottery money was supposed to go to education. When we got the income tax, we were supposed to have a state spending cap. None of that stuff ever happened. So please, please, let's not be fooled again. Let's let a new governor get in and develop a system that funds these programs with a priority without having to rely on state DOT.
Tim?
No tolls. No tolls. The next governor has to dedicate himself to first understanding what the real problem is, and it's how the State Transportation Fund monies are being spent and allocated. Time and again, Hartford insiders have raided the Special Transportation Fund to artificially balance the budget. This commissioner and this governor have increased operating expenses through the STF to the tune of 62%. I can tell you that tens of millions of dollars have been spent on designing projects that will never hit the street. So when I'm governor, we're going to get to the root of the problem, how they spend their money. Forensic audit of the Special Transportation Fund. Focus on the priorities. Guess what? The priorities are 95, 91, the Merritt Parkway, Shoreline East, Metro North, and quite frankly, the priority is not a busway to nowhere from New Britain to Hartford that nobody uses. Let's focus on the things that need to be improved to improve our infrastructure because it affects our quality of life and our ability to grow our tax base and spur economic development.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move on. I want to give you guys a time check, though. Bob, you have 8 minutes and 2 seconds. Steve, you have 6 minutes and 34 seconds. Mark, you have 5:41. Tim, you have 5:21. And David, you actually have 5:03. Kendra messed up.
I did not.
All right, question 5 is directed at Mr. Stefanowski. The next governor will inherit somewhere near $5 billion budget deficit. Some candidates up on the stage, as we've already talked about, want to phase out the income tax. So this is your chance to get into some detail here. How is it possible to balance the budgets, pay down debt, and cut Connecticut taxes?
When you think about it, Lee, this guy Malloy, he could not have done a worse job with this economy if he tried. If you stood him up 8 years ago and said, do everything you can wrong, he really couldn't have done a better job. This next governor is going to step into probably a $10 billion budget deficit. The state employee pension plan is $100 billion underfunded. We've got the worst roads and bridges in the nation, and people are leaving our state more than any other state in the union. I'm the only candidate up here that has a comprehensive plan and the experience to turn this state around. When I first decided to run, I went down to Tennessee, which has no state income tax. I met with Art Laffer. Dr. Arthur Laffer was the architect of Ronald Reagan's tax plan and more recently Donald Trump. Look at what Trump's tax plan has done for this nation in the last 4 months. Amen. We can do that in Connecticut. But we don't need politicians doing it. We need leadership. We'll get rid of the death tax. We lose tons of income just down to the state of Florida to avoid a death tax that generates less than 1% of the revenue of this state. corporate income tax, lower it so that businesses want to come back to this state. It'll create jobs, it'll create disposable income, and it'll start a virtuous cycle of growth, rather than what we have right now, which is a destructive cycle, a death spiral. Zero-based budgeting. When I was CFO of UPS, I ripped $1 billion of cost out my first year there. I had every single department come in. I said, I don't care what was in your budget last year. It's zero. And we're only adding back in what we absolutely have to have. Now, Mark talks about government experience. Do you think when I did that, people said, oh, yippee, let's do it? Of course not. They all said, there's no way we're ever going to do this. What did we do? Over 12 months, we ripped out $1 billion of cost, and the next year, we ripped out another $1 billion. That's what leadership is. We're going to introduce a taxpayer bill of rights. Give the power back to the people. Referendum, initiative, recall. If we had those, when Noel Larkin put that, tax in 1991, it would have never happened. We need somebody who's run an organization the size of Connecticut. I have. We need somebody with a plan. We need somebody who can negotiate. We need a governor who can build consensus. We do not need another divisive, pugnacious governor. That's the last thing we need. We need someone who's tough, someone who's firm, and someone who's done it before. And Lee, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to do it for the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, let me just say, there's a lot of discussion about reform, redesign the state pension system. The reality is, we need to end the current state pension system as it exists. We cannot fund it, we won't be able to fund it in the future, and it's unfair to hire somebody and tell them they're going to have the benefit that will never be able to happen 30 years from now. So we have to start from there. But look, we've already issued this week our plan, one piece of our plan for the pension situation by offering a voluntary buyout to state employees that will honor our commitment to them, but get them out of the system so our annually required contribution down the line won't be as high. So some governor later in the next decade will be able to benefit from not having to make these tremendous contributions to the pension system. We've done that in Danbury. We executed that successfully, and about 30 to 35% of our employees took it. So our arc in the years out, what we have to put in the pension fund has dropped dramatically. Secondly, we have $12 billion worth of state property that we frankly don't know where it is, how much of it we have, and what its worth is, and how we can derive revenue out of it. We can generate about $700 million of revenue each year out of using and leveraging that property in a variety of different ways. But I tell you one thing too that this governor and this government can't do. They can't go out and build a gun range in Griswold without talking to the residents in Griswold. Yeah. Without looking at all of our assets throughout the state of Connecticut so that our state troopers can have a gun range that is fair in their worshiping. This government can't turn its back on those people that have crumbling foundations and come up with some half-baked plan to be able to help them and turn their back on them as well and leave them stuck with houses that are essentially worthless. So these are all things that have to be done within the context of being able to govern our state, and that's why we have a phase-out. Year one of in our budget plan, and we've already begun developing it, we cut $400 million out of the income tax and we put it back in your pocket so you can go out and spend it on stuff and jumpstart our economy.
Anyone? David?
Lee, what I can tell you, the last thing that this state needs is a governor that's unprincipled. The governor must have guts. The governor must be principled. The governor must be ready on day one to fight for the people of the state of Connecticut. And the last thing the state of Connecticut needs is a governor that finds their value system in a poll or a focus group. With me, what you see is what you get. Now, how are we going to close this budget deficit? You're not going to be able to eliminate any taxes until you have the political fortitude to discuss the real problem in the state, and it's the crushing, unfunded pension and retiree health care liabilities. You are not going to be able to balance a budget that has been in structural deficit for the last 10 years unless and until you confront this problem. Now, people don't like to talk about it. Some people in our party don't like to talk about it because they're worried about the blowback in a general election campaign. I'm not going to tell people what they want to hear to win an election. I'm going to tell people what they need to hear to save the state of Connecticut. And if I'm elected governor in my first 45 days, I will send a budget repair bill to the legislature that deals with comprehensive pension and benefit reform that recognizes exacerbate the deficit. If we do not deal with that right out of the gate, 4 years from now, we will be standing on this stage talking about a $10 billion budget deficit that follow tax hikes and continued mass exodus from the state. We deal with that first to get our fiscal house in order.
So Lee, getting back to your question, I think you're asking us about the numbers. And again, not to be a stickler, but people are talking about a $10 billion budget deficit. Well, if you actually looked at the numbers, government said over the next 4 years it will be $11 billion. So what we're asking everybody here is to do their homework. And I got 5 kids over the summer. That's not a popular thing to do, to ask you to do your homework. I've only got about 4 minutes left here, so I can't go through all the details. But you can go to our website, davidsterman.com. And the soundbite of we're going to give you a 401k plan, we're going to restructure. This is tough stuff. No state has ever done what we need to do in this state, and we talk about how we're going to do it. In terms of a tax plan, again, the numbers have to work. Remember, eliminating the personal income tax, it costs $9.5 billion a year. We need to reduce taxes. I grew up in Massachusetts when it was called Taxachusetts because our taxes were too high, and we were losing people and companies just like we are today. We have a plan to reduce taxes by $3 billion. We go from 7 brackets to 3. The first $10,000, you pay nothing. If you're paying 5 or 5.5 today, you go down to 4, and the top bracket is 5. We eliminate the estate tax. We eliminate the business entity tax. We reduce the corporate rate to 5%. It costs $3 billion. We run the numbers. We then tell you how we're going to pay for it. $2 billion in spending cuts, and $1 billion by getting rid of special deals in our tax code. The numbers are there. Go do your homework. Thank you.
Steve?
You know, when you're trained by the United States Navy to be a nuclear submarine officer, they send us out to do ambitious things, but they also teach us how to split atoms and neutrons. And it's a dangerous thing. And you have to deal, if you train properly for those moments, you have to deal with reality and detail, and then you have to lead and pull people together to execute on that if you want that nuclear submarine to come back home safely. So this does get down to specifics and detail. And that's when I talk about a detailed plan that I've spent 2 years myself working with experts, but it's my plan and my budget that I'm working on. So in that, I break into 3 phases. Day 1, targeted tax reforms for the people of Connecticut we want to hug and keep here. Seniors, eliminate the estate tax, tax on Social Security and pensions. 2, phase out the corporate tax over 3 years. 3, a middle-class tax cut to people make $100,000 or less. We have to hug those people that we're evicting to Florida. And that costs $500 million a year, 4% of what we spend, and we have to go after $3.5 billion of annual savings. There are 79 departments in the state of Connecticut. There were 40 when I was a kid. Why do we have an office for early childhood development, a department of K-12, and higher education? Why don't we have one, and we can have actually standards from cradle to when you get out of college? So you have to deal with the details. Why do we have a Medicaid system that we spend $3 billion a year on? We're the only state in the nation that self-administers it. Every other state outsources it and saves about 20%. That's $500 million. So I'd love to get more into details here because I have a detailed plan on this. But if we want to bring this submarine back into port, you have to have someone who is trained to do it, knows the facts, and can lead you back into port safely.
All right. So we're a little more than halfway done, as you can see the timers. Let me give them a countdown again. Bob here at 5:15, Steve here at 4:35, Mark here at 3:39, Tim at 3:49, and David 3:32. I'll give you a countdown when you get to 3, 2, and 1, okay, guys? Just so you know when you're getting close. You guys mind if we find out a little bit about their personality? Can you guys turn no clocks right now for the next couple seconds? I'll tell you when to pick them up again. Just a couple of things. David, I'm going to start with you, and we'll just go each one. All right, make it easy. And if you guys want to yell and scream during this, you can. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Red Sox or Yankees? Red Sox or Yankees? Mark?
Red Sox.
All right, Steve?
Mets.
Nets.
New York Giants.
All right. You're on. I'm gonna start with you. Come back this way. You're on a desert island. What record album do you have with you?
Rolling Stones.
Eagles, Hotel California.
Eagles. Smart.
Beatles, the White Album.
There it is.
Dave Matthews, Under the Table.
What, Abbey Road? All right. Listen, you come out of Mohegan Sun tonight. David, I'll start with you. You take a left. You got to go to Stop and Shop. Your wife calls you. She needs milk. How much does it cost a gallon?
About 25.
About 25. Tim.
Probably $3.25.
$3.25. Mark.
I buy half gallons, so around $2.
All right.
Non-organic, $3. Organic, $4.50.
Organic skim, $4.52.
Four-legged friends at home, family members. You got any dogs, cats? Dogs, cats, birds?
Chickens, cats, fish, birds, you name it.
All right, Steve?
Dog.
Dog, Bob,
I
Mark?
got a beautiful rescue dog.
There you go. Tim?
I've got a beautiful bobcat that's been hanging out in my backyard.
Listen, don't call DEEP. They'll come out and we'll strangle it,
Yeah,
please.
don't exercise
Yeah,
your
please don't do that. David?
We got 3 dogs, 3 cats, and a blue-tongued skink.
All right, one more, and then we'll get back to the real questions. Grade Trump on his first 18 months. Give him a grade, David.
A.
A.
I give him an A.
Likewise,
A.
All right, 580. All right, everybody, if you can give these guys a round of applause, we're at the midway point. They're doing great. Also, I really like to thank the Mohegan Sun. I mean, this is the most amazing room. Take a look around. There are 500 people in here to see a debate. Again, the next governor up on the stage right now tonight. So, we'll go back to the beginning, and we'll start with Tim. Again, time is of the essence, gentlemen, so I would stress that you use your time wisely. I still have at least 5 more questions to ask. We don't have to necessarily get that far if you guys run out of time, but we'll see what happens. Tim, sitting in the audience today, I'm sure there are a few, by the way, timekeepers, be ready. Sitting in the audience today, I'm sure there are a few Connecticut union state workers, people who signed to do a job with the assumption that the benefit package that they bargained for would still be there for them when they retire. What do you say to that worker who wants what he's promised?
Well, I think I bring a unique perspective. I don't know, but I think I'm the only person on this stage that's the son of union members. My parents are retired public school teachers. My mom's birthday's tomorrow. Happy birthday, Mom. And they both served for many years as teachers and were members of unions and paid into a retirement system over a period of time. So here's what I would say to them. What I would say to them is that as governor, I'm going to talk to the rank and file members of our unions. I'm not going to talk to the union leadership for this reason. I don't believe it's pro-labor to make promises to people that you don't fund, that you kick the can on, and that you continue to misrepresent over time and compromise their retirement security. That's not being pro-labor. And that's something that the Democrats don't understand. What I would tell union members is, I'm going to have the same relationship that I had with my unions in Trumbull, where we understood the roles, we disagreed, we negotiated hard, but at the end of the day, the message that I had for them was to protect your retirement security, because I inherited an unfunded pension system at 27% when I took office. To protect your retirement security, we're going to have to make changes. And that's why we renegotiated 10 labor agreements that now have defined contribution plans for new employees, increased contribution levels for existing employees, recognizing that that was necessary, but also recognizing that government needed to stop kicking the can. We invested nearly $50 million additional dollars into our pension fund over 8 operating budgets, fully funding our ARC, and as a result, upgrading our credit rating 1 step below the coveted AAA. There needs to be a mutual respect, but there needs to be an understanding that there's a line. The unions represent their members, management represents the taxpayers, and I'll tell you this, there will not be a Speaker of the House of Representatives who's a paid union employee at the same time they are Speaker when I am elected the Governor of the state of Connecticut. We're going to be firm, or we're going to be fair.
Bob? This is one of the differences between politicians and people in the real world. Politicians tend to kick the can down the road. They'll delay the inevitable, and they'll make people try to feel good. The union employees deserve to hear the truth. Those checks are going to bounce someday. But until we get a business leader into the governor's seat who's going to have the tough discussions, treat people fairly, roll out an economic plan like I'm rolling out that's going to stimulate the economy and help develop more tax revenue and pay our way out of this problem, it's never going to get solved. What does this governor do? He bails out the city of Hartford. What does this governor do? He engages CBAC for another 10 years. What does this governor do? He does nothing. We need a business person who's going to come in and finally treat the state of Connecticut like what it is, which is a big, troubled business that needs to be turned around. We need private sector leadership, someone who's done it before, someone who has a plan, and I'm going to do it for Connecticut.
Steve?
My grandfather and father and grandmother immigrated from Czechoslovakia 6 months before Hitler rolled through in 1938. My grandfather worked in Heasley Mine No. 3 in the coal mine union in western Pennsylvania, make enough money to get my family here. My dad worked in the Bethlehem Steel Union, and my mom was a Waterford, Connecticut school teacher just down the road. So I understand the important role of unions in our history, and maybe I would have met my grandfather if things like OSHA had been stronger, but he died before I had a chance to meet him. So this is an important discussion for me, because I think that what this is about is restoring fiscal stability to our state. And it's easy to put sound bites on there. But what fiscal stability is, how can you look at a retiree and say, your pension's coming? Or you're paying into a system that may be in default already. Or you're a taxpayer that feels like, what is happening? So we need, all the knobs are out there, ladies and gentlemen, to solve this. The actuarial knobs, the different plans of going to Wall Street and maybe putting people on a 401k. This is about sitting down with people, talking to seniors and saying, I want to deliver a pension that you can count on. Or if you're a retiree, you're paying, or you're a current worker, you're paying into a system, it will be there. And it may require adjustments. And a new worker, a 401k is what's happening in the world. That's your future. But you have to have a leader who can sit down, have the empathy of what people are going through, have looked at the problem, and be able to negotiate through that. And in the end of the day, this is about fiscal stability. And if there's resistance out there from union workers or the union bosses, really, who don't want this fiscal stability, there are protections in our Constitution that will allow me as governor to make sure we don't go bankrupt so they don't get hurt. It's called the Sovereign Immunity Clause in our Constitution. So I will make everything available, but I want to sit down and work through this with people, but I will not let you go bankrupt. This is about fiscal stability for our state. Thank you.
Mark? You know, years ago when Scott Walker got elected, he had his moment. And here in Connecticut, this is really our moment. This is what I spoke to in my opening. This is the Connecticut moment. If we don't make these changes now, these pensions and these unfunded liabilities are the Pac-Man of our budget. They eat every piece and every corner. You're going to have one state trooper in the entire state of Connecticut being able to do anything. So we need to make our argument to that employee to say, look, new employees don't hurt you. They're in high school right now. Let's change them to a 401k style program so we can save your pension. To those other employees, we need to go to them and say, look, we want to offer you a voluntary buyout to buy out the net worth of your pension so you're out of the system, so our taxpayers aren't saddled with it. And then ultimately, we need to go back and renegotiate those contracts that we feel there are benefits in there that just are simply sustainable. Look, as mayor, I've negotiated over 30 contracts with 6 different collective bargaining units. I've been able to get unions to agree to 401k style plans and to buyouts and to all the things that I'm talking about here. It can be done. But you got to be able to lead and bring consensus. You can't order people to do this stuff. And you know you're going to have a battle with, as mentioned, with the leadership in this process. But you got to remember who you support. You got to remember who pays your bills, who pays your payroll every year, every week. And that's you, the taxpayers of this state. We have a governor right now that doesn't work for you. He's bought and paid for by the unions. And we all know it. And it's time we put an end to it.
David?
Just so we all understand the order of magnitude of the problem we have here, if we were talking to 3 state employees, what we'd say is we put aside almost enough money for one of you, and we put away nothing for the other 2. I was in Norwalk at Open Door, a homeless shelter. I was introduced and the security guard there said, "I'm a state employee. You're the guy who's going to take away my pensions." I said, "No, I'm the person who's going to save your pensions." We can't get people to 100 cents on the dollar because for years and years, politicians made promises they could not keep with money they did not have. We're going to make good promises to them going forward. It's going to require leadership. It's also going to require a plan that's realistic. To say we can just put new retirees on a 401k plan and everyone else we're going to buy them out at full, the numbers do not work. Bloomberg News said we are at risk of default in this state. If you were in the private sector and you had this plan, you'd be turned over to the Pension Fund Guarantee Corporation to restructure you. We need to have a governor who understands the numbers and who has the willingness to move in the direction we need to put our state back on track.
Bob, you have 411, Steve 233, Mark 204, Tim 151, David 214. Mark, you get the next question. I had a lot of women who sent me sort of the same idea for a question, so I'm going to throw it out there and you guys can spend as much time on it as you like. But if the Supreme Court somehow overturned Roe versus Wade, would you ask the Connecticut legislation to overturn the Connecticut abortion laws?
Thank you for that question, Lee. I really appreciate it. Because you get me unelected now. Me too, right? So unfair. Look, if the Supreme Court does that, and I sincerely doubt that they would, but let's just assume that they do, I don't feel comfortable putting government between a woman and her doctor. While I consider myself personally pro-life, and if my wife got pregnant, I would counsel her, and together as a couple, we'd make that decision to carry the baby to term, unless it endangered her own personal life. I would do that. But this is a personal decision for each couple, and certainly for women. And I don't want to put our government making decisions for women out there. So no, I wouldn't try to pursue any kind of upstaging of the Supreme Court decision.
Anyone else? Want to go into deep water, Tim?
Quickly, Roe versus Wade is codified in our Connecticut general statutes. The essential holding of Roe is codified in the general statutes. If the Supreme Court were ever to reverse course, this is very much a pro-choice state, and it's codified in statute, so I would tell your listeners that that's not going to change here in the state of Connecticut.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
yeah, sure.
I'd agree. Knowing that it's codified in our statutes and the state constitution, for that reason, I'd agree. But what we're looking at this election, and we'd be very careful about, is that this election cannot be diverted by Ned Lamont to issues of social consequence, which are important, but that will be the object that they want to focus on. While we have destroyed 30% of the values of the home of Connecticut, it takes 30% longer to get anywhere in the state by train or rail, and that is what the focus has to be on. When I'm talking to people around this state, that is what they keep focus on. They want to know, do you have a plan to approach it, and can you turn the moving vans around?
All right, moving on. If no one else wants to weigh in on that, Steve, we'll go to you next. Surrounding states are increasing funding for the arts and culture, yet Connecticut recently allocated only $4.2 million for last year's budget, which represents a 60% decrease from 2009. As governor, what would you do to promote the vibrancy of our cities and towns, and what would you do to increase the state funding, which in the past has returned up to $7 for every one invested?
I have been fortunate. I went into the Silicon Valley and I've created a few high-tech companies out there. And it is important about how innovation and arts come together to create new markets and new products. That's why in my 5-step plan to build 300,000 jobs, we have to start and realize we have a lot of the assets here that will reinforce the arts. Yes, the budget's been gutted by Governor Malloy, and that is kind of the cause, but we need a leader who's going to recognize, and y'all can look at my chart here if you like, that the career corridors I want to build from Hartford to New Haven, Groton to Greenwich, in those career corridors, there are 42 schools, trade schools to universities, and there are 24 Fortune 1000 companies that have not been evicted yet from Connecticut. And what we need to do is get those two entities talking, because governors have never done that in Connecticut. So we can have a supply chain of trained people for the 50,000 job openings in Connecticut now. And we need to do this around the cities, around Roosevelt Island projects, which I've talked about. And when we get universities and businesses into our cities, what happens? Millennials show up, the arts show up, restaurants show up. And that's why my 5-step plan of 300,000 jobs anchored in career corridors is so critical at refunding the arts, bring innovation and creativity back so we can be a jobs engine again.
Steve, you have 35 seconds left. Mark, you're up.
Yes.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I think most of the... What's that?
Which one, Mark's was? All right, we'll give him an extra 10 seconds. Okay?
Reload it.
Go ahead. It's all right.
So
Rocky, just don't worry about it.
there's a lot of things we need to do in this state. I agree with you. One of the things we should be investing more in is tourism. I think most of us were at the tourism board a few weeks ago. There's a ton of great assets that this state has, and you invest $1 on tourism, they return 3 times that. But until we get this economy moving, we're not going to be able to do anything. That's why my economic plan is so important. Lower the tax rate, get people to be back here, generate jobs, generate income, and we can do all these necessary things, but it fundamentally starts with tough decisions around tax policy. I've got a plan to do it.
So I've been endorsed by Len Suzio. Len is one of the most conservative senators we have in this state. He's been the champion of getting rid of this early release. You look at the number of people that come out of that program that commit a crime again, it's embarrassing. We need to get rid of it. We need to build back up our police forces across the state. We need to keep our people safe. We need to invest in security. And we need to reverse the damage, once again, that Dan Malloy has done over the last 8 years. And it's exactly what I'll do when I'm the next governor.
Anyone else? Tim?
Well, I'm the only candidate in this race that has formed a criminal justice task force, and I've asked that task force to give me a series of recommendations that I will propose before the August 14th primary, because I want voters to understand very clearly that when it comes to law and order, I am the law and order candidate in this race for governor. I'm proud that Dr. Pettit agreed to serve on this criminal justice task force. Representative Stolchik. Look, you know what, one of the things about leading a municipality is you work with law enforcement on a daily basis. You work with your police chief and your sworn men and women that work every single day to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. I will bring that same commitment to law enforcement that I had as Trumbull's first selectman as governor. The state police have been decimated under this governor. Decimated. When I'm elected governor, we're going to start promoting the good guys and stop promoting the bad guys, which this governor has done. I'm the only candidate in the last 17 months that has talked about eliminating the early prisoner release program for 17 months. Only candidate who said, I am in favor of reinstituting capital punishment right out of the gate. Only candidate who said, we need to crack down on sanctuary cities. So actions speak louder than words, and by virtue of my actions in supporting law enforcement for 8 years, people know very clearly that I will be a law and order governor.
Anyone else want to weigh on the police? Mr. Bowden?
Very quickly, I will tell you, Danbury is the safest city in the state because we have the lowest unemployment rate in the state. You raise economic activity, you give people hope and give them a reason for a job. But one of the biggest tragedies we saw in the, quote, reforms that we saw was the elimination of the school drug-free zones, which has encouraged dealers, particularly in this opioid crisis, to hang outside our schools and our neighborhoods and across the state of Connecticut. I want to re-implement the drug-free zone in the state of Connecticut.
Yes.
26 seconds.
26 seconds.
Look, as a Navy veteran for 9 years, I secured these waters, and safety is the first thing your governor has to deliver for you. Keep people safe. So I have been in support of getting rid of the early release program, as well as sanctuary cities. With me, I will keep you safe.
All right, everyone, so we've come to pretty much the end. We have just the closing arguments. Once again, if you guys can please, closing arguments, it's a trial. So you guys, if you can give them a round of applause. These guys have done a great job. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody behind the scenes putting this thing together was a pretty big deal. So I want to thank everybody for that. So as we close, we'll go in order again. And Bob, you're going to have 3 minutes and 56 seconds. Again, you can start the timer when it gets to 0. I'll handle the last minute. Steve, you'll have 108, Mark 120, Tim 108, and David, you'll have 101. Excuse me, 201, sorry. Tim, you have 1 minute and 8 seconds.
I thought I'd go last.
Did we decide that we were going to flip it around? No, we decided we're going to go in order, Tim. Sorry.
I want to thank everyone for attending this debate, and I want to thank you for sponsoring this debate. You know, I'm going to end as I began. This primary campaign comes down to one word, and that word is trust. Who can Republican primary voters trust to not only prosecute the campaign that will lead us to victory in November, but who can Republican primary voters trust to govern like a Republican come January of 2019? Ladies and gentlemen, I've been a Republican my entire life. I've voted in every election. And for the last 18 months, I have demonstrated that actions do speak louder than words in standing up to the status quo in Hartford and taking on the Hartford insiders in both parties. The next governor needs to understand that political correctness is now over. If ever there was a time to send proven reformers and Hartford outsiders to the Gold Dome to shake things up, it's now.
Time.
I am a fighter, and Connecticut needs a fighter now.
Mark?
Well, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Thank you, Mohegan Sun, for hosting this, and of course, Lee, for all of your hard work here. Look, at the beginning of my remarks, I talked a little bit about the list of last. You got that, we've heard that all debate long. Let me just tell you quickly about the list of first, because this election is really going to be about A, who was the most electable, and B, who's been able to, as a demonstrated record of delivering success.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. To be clear, the city of Danbury has the lowest unemployment rate in the state of any major city. The city of Danbury has the lowest sewer and water rates of any major city, in the state of Connecticut. The city of Danbury has some of the lowest effective property tax rates in the state of Connecticut. The city of Danbury was just named as the best city to start a business in the state of Connecticut. The city of Danbury was just named as the most livable city in the state of Connecticut. And we are the fastest growing in the state of Connecticut. That speaks volumes about the way I've led my city of 44 square miles and almost 90,000 residents. And that speaks volumes about how I'm going to jumpstart this economy, put our people back to work, so that all of us can once again be known as that we come from the envy of New England. God bless you, and God bless America. It's a great country.
Mark, thank you. Timekeepers, I'm going to take care of it, okay? I got it in here. Steve, you're up next. You've got 1 minute and 8 seconds.
Thank you again, Lee and Mohegan Sun. As I said at the outset, this election is about makers versus takers, and this state has made me. I grew up here, lived in 4 zip codes around the state. I did my military service here. I've created good high-tech jobs that we need here more than, at this time, than anywhere. So, submariners are trained firefighters, and I've been trained to run into the fire, and we have a big fire here. But to do that, you have to prepare, have the experience, plan, and character to do it. And I think I've spent a little time about that. I'll leave you with this, because my grandfather, who immigrated from Germany, once said to me, Steve, when you apply heat to iron, it becomes steel. And I am a tested, hardened individual who has the experience, plan, and character to turn the moving vans around so you all can build your life here, build a family here, build a career, and retire with dignity once again in Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. David, you have 2 minutes and 1 second.
Lee, thank you very much. What we're looking for here is a leader. And what we're talking about is leadership. It's not management, it's leadership. 3 critical qualities that we need in our leader. The first is, despite all the challenges that we have in our state, we need somebody who sees the opportunities that we have in this tremendous state. The second thing is we need somebody who is going to fight for the people every day, who doesn't owe the Hartford insiders anything, who doesn't owe anybody anything, who's going to say the same thing whether in a Republican town committee meeting or speaking with a state employee. The other thing is we need somebody who's going to bring everybody together. We need votes not only from Republicans, we need independents, and we need Democrats as well. And I look for that inspiration from Ronald Reagan. One of the strongest memories I had growing up was of Jimmy Carter addressing the nation from the Oval Office in a beige cardigan. And he did that after the spike in oil prices. He turned to the thermostat and he turned it down and he said, it's time to learn to live with less. That's what Dan Malloy has been telling us. Ronald Reagan wore a great suit. He wore a really nice tie. I taught my fourth child, Charlie, how to tie a tie. He tied a beautiful Windsor knot. He said, we can make it morning in America again. He said, I'm not content containing communism. We're going to win the Cold War. My youngest son, William, is 9 years old. And he asked me if you could live anywhere in the world, Dad, where would you live? I came to Connecticut to get a job. I raised my 5 children here, and I started a business here because it was the best place in the country to live, work, and raise a family. With the right leadership, it can and will be again. Join me. Let's save Connecticut.
Thank you, David. Bob, you have 47 minutes and 12 seconds.
Go ahead, 3:56. So thank you, Lee. What a terrific crowd tonight. I promise I won't take my whole 47 minutes. Thanks for listening. This state is in a crisis. And you've seen quite a contrast up here tonight. And if you guys honestly believe, after what you've seen tonight, that a career politician is the next best person to fix a mess created by career politicians, well, I'm not your guy. What I am is I'm the only person on this stage who's ever run an organization anywhere near the size of the state of Connecticut. I was a senior executive at GE. I turned around multi-billion-dollar failing businesses. Does that sound familiar? The state of Connecticut is a multi-billion-dollar failing business. As CFO of UBS and Bank, I had a $500 billion business across 35 countries. I'm first and foremost an outsider. I'm a business person. I know how to negotiate. I know how to gain consensus. I know how to cut costs, and I know how to execute on a plan. The last thing this state needs right now is another divisive, pugnacious, separatist governor like we have in Dan Malloy. We need someone who's tough. We need someone who's firm. But we need someone who knows how to collaborate. I've been doing it in the corporate sector for 30 years. It's not any different in government. We're going to fix the state. I got a 5-point plan. We're going to eliminate the death tax. We're going to get rid of the corporate tax over 2 years. We're going to phase out the state income tax over 8 years. We're going to rip costs out of this budget like you've never seen with zero-based budgeting. We're going to give the power back to the taxpayers through a taxpayer bill of rights. We're going to win this governor election, but as importantly, we need to rally as Republicans to also get the House and the Senate. We're going to win this primary. We're going to win this general. We're going to turn this state around. I've done it before. I'm going to do it for the state of Connecticut. Thank you for your time and attention tonight.